My name is Mete Atamel. I am a developer advocate at Google, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Knative serving. Before I start my talk, my deck is already on speaker deck, and the demo that I'm going to show, it's already on GitHub, so feel free to check them out after watching the video. So what is Knative? Knative, it's a Kubernetes-based open source building blocks for serverless. What does that mean? You can think of it as a number of components that you can install on top of Kubernetes, and it will turn Kubernetes into a serverless framework for you. And we'll take a look at what that means later in the talk. It's an open source project on GitHub. It was started by Google, but now a number of companies and people as well, they're contributing, and feel free to contribute as well if you want. Knative is written in Go, so you should know a little bit of Go before contributing. When we think about serverless, serverless gives us a lot of velocity when we're developing software because you get a lot of things for free. You get the infrastructure taken care, you get the security, the base level security taken care, you pay for what you use, you have event-driven services that are usually stateless, and because of that, you can iterate really fast on serverless. But at the same time, serverless frameworks, they come with limitations. You can use only certain languages, you can do only certain use cases, and if your application doesn't fall into those categories, then you need to fall back onto something. And usually that thing is containers. The beauty of the containers is that you can use any language you want, you can use any framework you want, and there's a rich ecosystem around containers with projects like Kubernetes and Istio and Knative and others. So containers give you a lot of flexibility, but then you lose the velocity that comes with serverless. So up until so far, you had to choose one or the other. But thankfully, projects like Knative and its managed custom Cloud Run that I'm going to talk about later, they try to change this. So Knative tries to bring serverless to containers, so you don't have to make this choice. Knative runs anywhere there's Kubernetes, and as I mentioned, it's an open source project. But then there's also something called Cloud Run, which is based on Knative, but it runs on Google Cloud. You can think of it as Knative, but managed by Google for you. So it's even much easier than using Knative on your own. In today's talk, I'm going to be talking about Knative mainly, but in other episodes, I will be talking about Cloud Run as well. So the Knative stack looks like this. At the bottom layer, you have Kubernetes. And then on top of that, you need to install a gateway because Knative doesn't try to solve networking problems. So it doesn't try to figure out how to get traffic to your containers. Instead, it relies on gateways like Istio, Glue, Ambassador, and others to do that. Once you install Kubernetes and the gateway, you install Knative components, so the Knative serving and Knative eventing. And then you can use Knative as is. But then if you're already running in a cloud provider, there are products built on top of Knative like Cloud Run and other products from other cloud providers as well. So you might want to check those out before using Knative directly because they usually make it easier to use Knative. Now, what is Knative serving? Knative serving allows you to deploy containers in a serverless way. So what I mean by that is that you define a Knative service, and then you tell Knative, this is my container, this is my configuration, and then tell Knative to deploy the container, and then Knative takes care of the rest. So it deploys your container in a pod, it configures traffic to your container so people from outside can get to your container. It sets up automatic scaling, so your container can scale up to n that you define, or it scales down to 0 if no one uses it. You get a pretty basic configuration and revision management. So every time you deploy your container, you get a new revision of the container. And then once you have multiple revisions, you can split traffic between those revisions so that you can do traffic splitting. The Knative primitives are kind of like this. At the top level, you have a Knative service. I should also mention that this is not a Kubernetes service, but it's a higher level Knative service. Then underneath, there's a configuration for the service where you define the container and other configuration of your service. Then you deploy the service and configuration, and then that gives you a revision for your service. Then the route gets pointed pointed to that revision. And then every time you change the configuration, a new revision gets created, and then the route gets updated to that revision, right? So that's done automatically for you. But then once you have multiple revisions, you can set traffic splitting rules in the route so that you can do, for example, 50% traffic here, 50% traffic there. So you can do things like that. Let me actually show you a quick example. So I have this Knative tutorial that I shared the link with you, and there's a lot of examples here, but I just want to show you a hello world example and see what it takes to deploy a container on Knative. First, you need to create your code. I have the code in C# and Python. You can take a look at it if you want, but all it does is that when the request comes in, it will just reply back with hello world, reading an environment variable. So I built my container image. I push my image to Docker Hub, and then I create my Knative service in a YAML file. So we are using Knative API. This is the service, it's a Knative service. This is the name of my service. This is the namespace that it will get installed into, in this case, default. And this is the configuration of my service. The configuration has an image that I pushed. It's version 1. And then it also has environment variables called target version 1. So I'm going to read that and print that out. So that's how I define my service. And then let's actually do this. So here, before I'm going to deploy it, I'll just watch something. So I'm watching the pods, the Knative service, configuration, revision, and route that I talked about before. Right now, you will see that there's 3 pods running. That's for some other eventing pods that I set up before this talk, but let's ignore them for now. And then I have my Knative service v1. So let's deploy the first service. And then as you can see, as soon as I deploy it, Knative creates a new service that has a dummy zip.io domain set up for me already. It has a configuration, it has a revision. This is the first revision. And then it has a route that's pointing to that service. So everything that we talked about is set up. And then if I do a curl, then you'll see that we have hello v1, right? Because we have the pod running as well. So that's what it takes to deploy a service to Knative. As I mentioned before, every time you change anything about the configuration, that creates a new revision, and the route gets updated to that revision. For example, if we go to our service and change the value of our environment variable from version 1 to version 2, this will be a configuration change. Or we can go to our code and change our code from hello to bye. That will be a code change, and then push the image and then update the image in our service. So these are both changes in our service. And if we do that, for example, let's do the configuration change. So this is service v2. This will deploy a new revision to our service, and then it will create a new pod for our new revision, and it will update the route to our revision. And if I go to curl and then hit the same URL, now we have hello v2. So we are going to the new updated service. If I do a code change and I push my image and deploy that, this will do the same thing. It will create a new revision and update my revision to it. And by the way, you can see that one of my pods, the first version, is terminating because it's scaling down to 0 because we have automatic scaling. So now it's scaling down to 0. Now, if I do a curl again, you can see that our code is updated to by v3. So stuff like this becomes really easy with Knative. Of course, in the real world, you don't update code like this. You probably want to do some kind of traffic splitting. So you want to deploy a new version, and then once that version is running, you want to send traffic to it like 50% with the old revision, and then eventually ramp up your traffic. So you can do that quite easily with Knative. First, you can give your revisions a predictable name. So because right now, if you look at our revisions, the revisions, they have like random names, but you can actually give your revisions, if you go to your service and under template metadata, you can give them a name. And then you can also set traffic rules. So in this case, I'm saying that this revision, I want it to be called version 1, and I want it to get 100% of the traffic. Let's do this change. So service v1 pinned, and you will see that a new revision gets created, but this revision now has a predictable name, hello world v1. And then if we do a curl again, we are back to v1. Now, if we deploy another revision called service v4, this will create another revision, hello v4, but then the definition of this version 4, so this is version 4, but our traffic rule still says it's version 1. So it's still version 1 is the one getting traffic. So we did a silent deploy right now. So, and if you go back here and do a curl, you can see that we are still doing version 1. But then if we go back here, and I think this should work, if you do latest dash, you can see that version 1 is accessible as well. So once I test out version 4 and I'm happy that it works, I can start sending traffic to it. And to send traffic to it, all we need to do is go back to our service, and then under traffic, then set some rules and say version 1 should get 50% and version 4 should get the other 50%. So if we do that, service v1, v4 split, now there's no new revisions, we only updated the route. And then if we do a curl again, we have version 4, another curl, version 4. But if it, oh, sorry, I need to change to this, the main URL. Yeah, so now it says version 1, and it says version 1, and then eventually, yeah, it says version 4. So we are doing roughly 50%, 50% traffic splitting. So that's, there's much more examples on my tutorial, but we don't have time for that right now, but feel free to check them out. And I think that's all I want to say about Knative serving. If you are interested more in Knative, I will be talking about Knative eventing and Cloud Run in other episodes, so please check them out, and thanks for watching.